Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for what is the first of our Ask Us Anything on Facebook Live. This is, we're trying something new, so patience would be appreciated. We're trying a lot of new technical things, so you won't just be listening to me for the day. We have several other experts in the room with us via Skype. Of course, they're not in the room because you can't do that anymore. But anyway, we are trying to come up with a way that we can connect with you guys, still answer questions, just like we'd like if we were running to you at a festival or coming by the place where you do work. We just want to be able to connect with you, answer questions you may have, stuff that's been hanging out in your head. So our primary method for that is for you to use the comment section on Facebook Live. So please put it in, ask us a question, and get it in the queue. We do realize that there is a delay between what we're doing now and when you'll actually hear it. And then, of course, we're going to have the delay of actually being able to read your question and pop it up there. So we're going to try to keep monitoring this as we go through, keep pulling up questions that are relevant. But this is only going to be as good as you guys make it. So if it sucks, it's on you. Anyway, that being said, I am Ryan Shelton. I actually work with the distributor for DiGiCo in the United States. I'm actually based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And then we actually have a couple other people joining with us that I would like to introduce you to now. First up is actually Matthew Larson. He is the VP of Group 1 Limited based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. So his home office there, of course, because nobody can travel. And then let's see here, also joining us is Chip Shaka. Chip is from Farmingdale, New York, so he is one of our support engineers based out of our Long Island office. And then we have Dan Page. He is product and brand ambassador. He is Southwest London. Am I right on that? Yeah, just thereabout. So he is, of course, it's evening over there, so we appreciate you joining us, Dan, and being a part of this. And then last but not least, the guy running the virtual switcher, Kyle McMahon from Indianapolis, Indiana. He is our training and support associate engineer, whatever you want to call him, give him his title. So anyway, we are all calling in via Skype, so you're going to have issues with lip sync, delay, all sorts of stuff, and probably the internet dropping out at some point. But like I said, appreciate your patience. We're going to try to monitor all those questions as they come in, so please keep them coming. We appreciate everybody joining us for this, so please let us know what you got. Because I figured it would take a couple of minutes, I thought of a couple of questions, and actually Dan Page helped me with these, but just a couple of things to talk about for us to start off the bat. So I think the first question is probably one of the most common questions we've been asked. At least I know it probably is for myself, probably for Kyle, actually, yeah, everybody here. So will the quantum software features come to the SD consoles? That's the question that's been posed to us numerous times. So let's take a second to talk about that. Short answer, Dan Page.
No. The quantum features are very specific to the quantum engine, different hardware, different FPGAs. In fact, the quantum engine has multiple FPGAs, entirely new design. So in order to offer those quantum software features, we needed the extra DSP, the extra horsepower that the quantum engine provided. So, you know, the true solo, nodal processing, mustard and spice rack, all those unique quantum software features will only appear on the consoles that have the quantum engine. So Quantum 7, Quantum 5, and the new Quantum 338.
Fantastic, thanks. So yeah, unfortunately that is a no answer there, but that doesn't mean the SD consoles will stop getting development. So as usual, they're getting ready to release an update for both the quantums and for SD consoles. So the last digits on your software version, so a long time ago, version 987, the quantum that I'm next to is version 1229. So whatever the release version is of the software will be the same across quantum and SD consoles. So you'll still be able to take a session built on an SD, convert it to a quantum, take a quantum session, and convert it to an SD. Anything to add to that, Matt Larson?
No, I think we're good.
All right, cool. The next question, what makes the quantum consoles so different from other DiGiCo consoles? I think, Dan, you alluded to this a little bit, but do you just want to dive into a little more detail on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all about the continuing development that DiGiCo do from a hardware point of view, from a user feedback point of view. Newer generations of FPGA allow us to develop new engines that ultimately are going to give us better expandability in terms of tool set in the future. It's a platform for development. So while, as you say, we will continue to develop software features and tools for the SD range, Quantum as a range is taking shape and gives us a great development platform for not only the tools that we offer now, the things that I mentioned, the nodal processing and mustard, but future developments in software which only can happen with the increased DSP that we can harness as part of the quantum engine. That's
what you're saying is. What you're saying is we got a lot out of the original FPGAs that were released with the SD7. What was that, 2007? When that was announced and shown? Yeah.
Absolutely. We've had a good 12-year run on SD consoles, and for a lot of people, actually, channel count wise, tool set wise, audio quality, it's still better than nearly everything you can find on the market from other places. And continues to offer great value, great sound quality, flexibility, all the things that we do will carry on. But of course, there's a point where you have to make the next step up and develop a new set of tools for future generations of engineers.
Fantastic, cool. All right, anybody want to add anything to that? No. All right. So the third question. What market need were you seeing that made you design the Q338? So what gap in the market? Was it competition? Was it DiGiCo's propensity for developing a newer, better version because they can? What was the reason for that?
SD7, which became Quantum 7, was top of the game. It became very clear that there was, a need for other consoles with the same tool set in a more cost-effective package. The continuing R&D, actually, Quantum 3, while it looks the same in many respects and has the same workflow and features that everyone is used to, from the ground up, it was built with an entirely new architecture internally. So it gives us this sort of halfway house between the things that people know and love about DiGiCo and all the things that they would expect from us, but allows us to move forward with a mid-size console, mid-format console, which brings quantum features to a new set of users that maybe couldn't justify Quantum 7s, Quantum 5s, or even SD7s as part of their, budget on a tour or budget from an install or whatever it might be. There's no reason why those users should have to miss out just because they can't afford the biggest one we make. So, having something in the middle that offers that feature set and, all the tools that go with it was important to us. And as I say, the underlying technology inside as a platform allows us to move forward in the future.
Very nice. I would like to actually get Matt Larson's take on this in just a second as well. I think we're having a little technical issue there with him, but I would appreciate his input on this particular question as well. So while we're getting that sorted, so what you're saying is we have a new architecture, so not only do we have new screens visually on the outside, but the way we connect with the console internally, that's new as well. This is a big deal internally to the console. So while as what you're seeing on the screen looks very similar to what the software interface and everything on Q7. The audio engine side of things is probably, I would guess, somewhat similar to what we're doing in a Q7 as well. Obviously, they all have their unique aspects to it, but you're saying that the connections internally, the way that the panels communicate, things like that, obviously there's a higher resolution that needs to be pushed to these displays and things like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, based on the SD consoles, some of the internal architecture, was dating back to, the late 2007, 2008 and onwards. And things move on, and when you redesign a console from the ground up, you have the opportunity to improve things, make changes, take advantage of new developments in hardware and, internal infrastructure. And and it would be silly not to take advantage of those. So at some point in time, of course, you have to make the jump. But from a user's point of view, it's so important that we don't alienate them. So maintaining workflows and the user experience that they're used to is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've known, DiGiCo, in my opinion, really, obviously, going back to the D series, but it hasn't changed a lot, right? The actual workflow. We've added tons of features over the years, but the actual, the idea, the concept behind it hasn't really dramatically changed. Graphics, buttons, features, etc., but the actual workflow, in my opinion, hasn't dramatically changed. Whereas you look at some other platforms out there, sometimes every new console range they come out with, there's a new workflow and there's a new navigation, there's new menus, it's just a completely foreign and a new architecture that you have to get used to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, let's see here. I need questions from you guys. So Facebook, those of you watching, start shooting your questions in. Let's get it in. I see a couple people joining in that I know. So Phil Camp is watching from Clang. Hey, good to see you, bud. Tom Heinisch, I see in there. Justin, see here, Jim Shelton. No relation, actually, but good to see you, Jim. James Gordon, yeah, I see him in there. Austin, checking up on us. Matt is watching. That's good. All right, so Chip, I'm going to put the spotlight on you while some questions are coming in. What is a common issue that people call about that if you had the platform to just reach out to everybody and give them some advice from either a systems tech's point of view, from an engineer's point of view, is there anything you can think of off the top of your head that would be a good thing to just get out there, recommendations for people to take?
The obvious first thing that comes to mind is to make sure you're always loading your sessions. I see a lot of people get into bad habits where they're constantly just turning the console back on and operating without actually loading their files. So that's number one. It's an emergency file, like it's written in the background when you power cycle, and you shouldn't really rely on it unless you're in that situation. So that's a big one and pretty
awesome. Awesome. Well, since you're up here, Chip, I just saw a question come in. Kyle, do you see the question from Lyle on there? Could you put that up?
Unfortunately, the streaming, the comments aren't coming into Ecamm to push it, so we're going to have to just read them live. That's
okay. I can do that. Lyle, I'm probably going to mess up your last name, so my apologies. I think it's Baldes or Balds. Hey, everyone. Thank you in advance. When booted into Windows on an SD9, is it okay to change the console's IP address? Also, are there any specific online resources dedicated to networking knowledge for the SD and S range?
You're perfectly capable of changing the IP address. You should reach out to support for advice on it. We actually have a tech note to help with that. Obviously, we can't test every single situation, so I would recommend that you change it and have plenty of time to test it before you try it live. But we have a lot of venues that need to jump on in-house networks, and as long as it's fully tested, you should be okay. But you need to be careful and leave the time to do that.
So real quick, for those who are not familiar, Chip, tell them what a tech note is and what's the best way of getting those.
Tech notes. Well, the best way to do it, I guess, you can either reach out to support@digiconsoles.com or us-support@digiconsoles.com. We have a lot of tech notes available. There's also a bunch of them available on the DiGiCo website. Currently, they've been keeping updated notes going up on the new page.
Very cool. So a technical note, just a PDF that we put together, step-by-step instructions on what to do. So in this case, if I'm remembering correctly, this would be regarding a program called Radeon. It's different on different consoles, and the steps are going to be different based on what console you're on. So definitely reach out to support, get that technical note. They'll already have one prepared. I am thinking it is at $199 or $195. Does that sound right?
Radeon's $199.
$199. There's one specifically for modifying network settings as well, so they got some recommendations in there. So yeah, reach out to us. Once again, if you're in the US, that's us-support@digiconsoles.com, or directly to the UK, and that's just support@digiconsoles.com. We can get you those tech notes, and those are step-by-steps for how to walk through that.
And
let's see here.
Live even during this downtime. So
yes,
we are all monitoring
please.
US support and support at Digi.
Absolutely. All right, I see another one from Jeremy. I think it's Inyert. Once again, I'm probably butchering that name, so my apologies. Jeremy asked earlier, any S-Series updates in the works? If so, teasers. I do know there are S-Series updates in the works, but I don't know the time frame on that, and I'm probably not supposed to talk about anything in there. Dan Page, do you have anything to add into there that you may be aware of? And
no, not specifically. I know actually we're planning some Facebook Live instructions next week, and Tom, one of my colleagues, is going to go live doing some what's new in version 2.5. So we are still servicing that market and working on it and developing software. But I at this point can't really help you with specific information. As you say, if there are specific information that we can't provide today, reaching out to support at either the US or the UK support addresses, we still are here working, open for business, and can help. But do watch out for ongoing videos from DiGiCo next week, and there is an S-Series 1 coming soon.
Fantastic. So you should just plaster Tom with questions about what's coming in version 2.6. So fantastic. So with version 2. I assume it's going to be 2.6 at this point in time. I do know there's some back-end stuff in the works. Typically with software development, they always try to tackle more of what we would consider the boring side of things for the operators. So that is anything from system optimization to protocols, the way things communicate, tidying up the code base. They try to do that in every update. Some of them, which if you look through like the notes, you may not see just a important reason to update for you, but a lot of times those boring updates are the ones that actually help either the performance of the console or will enable communication between new protocols and stuff like that coming in the future. All right, Ben Shipman is asking, is the SD9 available as a package with a D2 rack and BNC cables? Ben, per our phone conversation earlier, yes, that is. That is available as an option, and I promise I will get you that pricing. So let's see here. Oh, yes. John Ferlito is asking if we can use a UB-MADI on Windows 10. So who are my Windows guys in the house? Dan, Chip is shaking his head. Dan, and you use a Mac as well, don't you?
I am a Mac user, absolutely.
Okay. I think we're all Mac users. Sorry, John. I do have a PC over there on the side. From my understanding, with the UB-MADI on Mac, it's obviously using core audio, so there's not really a need for any sort of drivers, and it just works if you have the right cable. I know with the new Thunderbolt 3 USB-C connectors, there's some issues with docks or dongles or things not providing enough power onto whatever it is, like 300 milliamps or something that needs to power that receiving chip on the UB-MADI side. But as far as Windows goes, there is drivers that are available from the website to download. And then I believe in Windows tries to grab onto an interface as the primary system audio interface. Does that sound correct to you, Dan?
It does sound right, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I do have some instructions, John, that I can send you as well. Basically, you need to make sure in Windows that the UB-MADI is not your primary audio interface. So it should not be the default one. If it is, you need to undo that, grab one of your internal options on your computer as your default audio device. Then that should free it up so an application can grab it. That's my understanding of how ASIO works. There is another program, once again, Dan, ASIO for all.
Yeah.
ASIO for all. Yep. So it is. I've done this a couple of times. It is not incredibly straightforward, from my understanding. But I do believe it allows that
for drivers. Yeah.
Okay. So I am understanding that it basically kind of frees up those ASIO drivers to be used by multiple programs and kind of simultaneously. So ASIO, the number 4, all. I believe is just Google that.
All responded to John on the messages.
Fantastic. Yep. Okay. All right, RJ Givens is asking if there is proper fader cleaning for the P&G faders. Chip, I think this will go to you. So those are for our theater friends that are using the P&G.
I'm not aware of a specific tech note, but it should be the same process that we recommend for the Alps on the SD7, SD5. Dan, do you know if there's a specific one for the P&G?
I'm aware of a specific different procedure than we'd use for our standard console faders.
Right.
Obviously, in the theatre community, that center set of faders do get hammered a little bit more than channel faders and maybe some other live consoles. They do get through faders a bit more quicker, but in a normal environment, I wouldn't expect any sort of special treatment to be needed. As I say, a lot of West End theatres and Broadway periodically will change them just because that's the primary focus of theatre mixing. If you've got problems with dirty faders, the biggest thing I would say is don't just go in and try and calibrate dirty faders, because you can obviously compound the issue and make it worse. You really must make sure that you are following support procedures, either from our support in the UK or support in the US, about how to clean your faders before you try and calibrate them. Because if you try and calibrate dirty faders, you can make them worse, because the internal systems just get confused about where the end limits are in terms of top and bottom travel. So if you have a dirty fader problem, reach out to support and we will assist you directly.
So while we're talking about faders, I would love to have this conversation with both of you guys as well. What would you say is the average lifespan of, like, let's say the lead vocal fader? Okay, so let's say because I know it's a variable thing, right? If you're in a church scenario and it's, maybe a traditional environment and they rarely touch the faders, maybe, other than just a couple of main ones, I'm assuming those faders are going to last for years and years and years and years, assuming you're doing some regular maintenance to clean those, keeping your console covered when it's not in use, things like that. On the flip side, if you're in a touring band, you're out doing festivals down in the desert and the sand, dusty environments, it's probably going to be a lot shorter. But Chip, your experience as a system tech and just being responsible for everything on a tour, what have you seen is kind of like the average life expectancy for a fader, or what should somebody expect?
Well, the install market, it's definitely going to be years as long as it's maintained properly. About every 6 months, I would say, on an install, just take the faders, do a day of maintenance on cleaning the surface, cleaning the faders. On a touring situation,
is that a good thing to have an intern do?
Pardon?
Is that a good thing to have an intern do?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
On the touring side of things, it'd probably be after each run. It would be more, especially during summertime when you're outdoors. The indoors, you could probably go 6 months as well, but it's going to be on a per event basis. You're not going to really be able to tell. You're going to have to go by your environments, and but I mean, an install fader should last years. That's for sure.
Yeah.
What you can find also is, like, in even theaters, you think they're so very clean, but reality is there's so many people coming in and out of the building every day. It's just kicking up the dirt through the carpet. The dirt is the enemy. If you're doing rodeo or some of those shows where they got that sugar sand, that's what's really abusive to the faders.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is what a lot of people do is they'll order like a dozen of them at a time or a whole console's worth, put the brand new faders in the desk, and then they clean those, and then they've got a spare set for later on. Rat Sound's really smart on this, is they actually will take 2 faders and put heat shrink on the connector, and they put them in a Shure microphone bag that's actually in the doghouse. The advantage there is if anybody's ever opened up those faders, they've actually cut off that heat shrink, so that the fader is used versus new. So having a couple spare faders out on the tour is really the trick to go, because it's usually the couple faders that you're on all the time that you might have a problem with. So it's just nice to have a spare versus having to just steal from another channel to get you through.
Yeah, thanks. All right, we have another question here. This is probably going to be for Kyle and Dan. This is from Andreas Sosa. Snapshots on timecode. So he is asking, how is timecode fed into and read by an SD12 or SD10? Kyle, I know you did a lot with time code on one of your tours. Am I remembering that correctly? You weren't firing snapshots off of? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. SD7 has LTC input. All of the others are MIDI, so it's MTC based. And within the snapshot panel, you can set recall times, MTC values at which snapshots will fire. So it's it's a really simple procedure in terms of allocating code times for snapshots to recall.
And I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Kyle,
I just heard. Yeah, I've got a cough mic button on my Stream Deck, and I hit the cough button, so my mic was off for that first part. Yeah. So what I was saying
so you
was,
want to repeat yourself?
Yeah. So bad producer here. Yeah. As far as what I was saying is, Brandon Blackwell, who mixes for Camila Cabella, and several other artists. He's actually done a really good job. He's sent me a PDF of how he actually does this on multiple consoles. I think what he told me is the first time he did this, he couldn't remember how he did it. So the second time he actually created his own little PDF so he could go back and remember how to do it. But the SD7 does have a linear timecode input, and that LTC actually generates MTC internally in the desk. Any other DiGiCo console, you're going to have to take a unit like a Rosendahl unit that takes that LTC input and converts it to MTC. And then from there in the snapshots, you're able to say at this hour, minute, second, and frame is going to be when that snapshot actually fires. Cowboy is the other one that does this, and he's got everything really tricked out for his Beyonce setup. So I know how they do it. I haven't personally done it, so luckily we've got a lot of good engineers out there that that do know how to do this. So
awesome. I had somebody, let me find them again in here, Alexi Belli. Once again, I'm probably messing up your name, my apologies. Any chances of seeing Mac OS offline software one day? So I'll answer this one, no. Anyway, there are several other people have commented that just use things like Parallels or Boot Camp, which is a great recommendation. Personally, I use an application called VirtualBox, and then I've also tested Crossover, which is a very inexpensive application that lets you run Windows programs natively. I'll put that in quotes, but basically allows you to not have to buy Windows. The benefit there is not having to do all the Windows updates just to keep everything working, just if you're just trying to run a single program with that. Dan, as being a Mac guy in the middle of a Windows R&D team, any recommendations that I missed?
I run VMware Fusion to run a Windows image. I have Boot Camp. Don't forget, S-Series has native Mac and PC offline. It's only the SD consoles we're talking about here. But any of those popular PC emulation, virtual machine type things, or a full Boot Camp install is really the way to go. But as I say, I'm VMware Fusion is my preferred.
I use Parallels and I don't have any problems.
Yeah,
cool.
But again, you have to buy the Windows software.
Yeah, VirtualBox is an open source one that I've been running. I believe Oracle is the one who originally developed that, and I'm not sure who's maintaining it now, but seems to work well. Dakota Poncilius, once again, my apologies on these last names. Is there a DAW that DiGiCo recommends for recording and virtual sound check?
No, not specifically. I think Reaper has been very popular for a very long time, and I'm a big fan of it. It's great. It's inexpensive. Please do buy software that you use professionally. Don't just forever demo it. I know you can, but I would suggest that you actually buy it. Some people turn to Waves Tracks for a while, which I believe is going end of life. So not really supported option.
Yeah.
I would avoid some of those
tears.
big popular sort of studio-based doors to some degree.
What are you trying to say? It's a 4-letter word, isn't it, that you're thinking of?
I'm not going to go there. It's not the right tool for the job. What you want in a virtual Soundcheck live capture environment is something robust and simple, and actually Reaper just does it really well.
It does. Yeah, personally, the only thing I'm unhappy with Reaper about is just the patching, the initial patching and setup. They, in my opinion, make that a little more difficult than it needs to be. But if you do this a lot, there's obviously a way in Reaper to build templates that would have your patching already done for you, and you can just load that template and go from there. So that's been my experience as well. Tracks Live was one of my absolute favorite programs just because it was so easy to get up and going with virtual Soundcheck. It was a download, install, connect your device, select multi-channel audio, and just select sample rate and go. There was very little to do with that, but we did hear that it is going to be end of life, so no future updates for it at this point, so you can keep going for the time being. Great questions. Let's see here. DJ Rockwell asks, I see that ROS is now an option for external devices. When will those commands be available, and what can you tell us about those commands? I'm assuming you're asking about the ROS audio protocol. I'm trying to think who actually has experience with this on board. I've done this with a couple of installs, but it was more just getting documentation to the integrator that was setting this up. I do know we have some emails, some tech notes, just with commands that needed to be loaded into one of the directories on the console. DJ, if you can reach out to us-support at digiconsoles.com, ask for that documentation. We can send you what you need, instructions, and all of that. Dan, it might not be a bad idea to have UK formally put something together. I don't know how popular this is. I do remember, just from my experience of dealing with it, it allows you to take which is essentially like a macro command, and be able to do like open a mic. So you can turn on a mic to a preset volume, you can mute or unmute a microphone or something like that, going through just for the main purpose of audio following video. So if you didn't have an audio engineer there, you could switch on a RAW switcher to a camera input and have it automatically open up this microphone or this stereo source or whatever needed to happen when it was switched to that input.
Absolutely, and actually, while we're talking about that external control side, there was a question that I'd seen scroll past a while back about OSC. Of course, OSC is the protocol we use for our iPad remote, and while we generally use a very specific set of OSC instructions, again, if you reach out to support, we can provide the full set of commands for OSC if you want to use other systems or build your own remotes using your own sort of OSC touch app or whatever it might be. So it's a really easy implementation for us, and pretty widely adopted by lots of manufacturers these days.
It does give the flexibility that you can have it control whatever you want, whether it be a Galileo system but just using the standard OSC control versus having to have a dedicated software that's on the desk, like say for Waves or for an acoustic system.
Yeah, and it's really user friendly to program. The way you write the OSC code, the strings, the commands are all very accessible, and we have documentation about what commands and how they're implemented on our systems.
There is an app out there, Osculator, I think is how they pronounce it, OSC Osculator, that you can get online as well.
Cool. All right, Chris Heckman. Hello, Chris. It's good. Thanks for joining us. Good to, I guess, see your name in the chats. He asked, are you guys going to do any webinars on using multiple, so 2 or more consoles, different series and gain sharing, setup, settings, and such? Kyle, what are you thinking?
the SD9 I have off to my side, it's on its own. Ryan's got a Q338 in his room right now, and so we don't have an extra console to show how to set up multiple consoles at this point. So we want to show you how to do the actual setup in the audio I/O, and we're planning on doing something when we can get that arranged. We are planning on doing some more webinars, doing some training type stuff too, going through the software at a later time. We're discussing that. So stay tuned to the DiGiCo page. Follow us on DiGiCo Master Series about those details. But there is some stuff that will be in the works for that. Awesome.
All right. I'm once again probably going to butcher the name, so my apologies. Amit Kau something, once again, really sorry. He says, after doing a default on all SD console, all preset disappear from the library. Any solution for this? Thank you. So Dan, I'm assuming that he is talking about defaulting a session, in which case the presets are included in that. How would you go about loading back in presets into a session?
Several ways of dealing with presets. When you do a default tool, you can unpress the button to clear the presets, which would retain them. As a general rule, when you're loading sessions and moving between session files, presets are retained on the console like an ongoing library. But defaulting all deliberately clears that off to stop sessions being bloated. But presets, actually, I would treat like a separate system. Save your preset files onto a USB key, load them back in when you need them, so you can have that library of your own, drum sounds, vocal sounds, whatever it might be, those channel settings available to you on whatever console you're on. They're transportable between all the console variants, which makes them a really easy way of moving channel settings between the consoles. And on the subject of presets, don't forget multi-channel presets. A preset doesn't have to be just one channel. You can make a preset that is multiple channels wide. So if you've got a standard way of setting your drums up, you could set up a preset that is 8 or 12 channels wide. All the settings we commonly use, and it's a good way and very quick way of moving those sessions about. So there's a few ways to handle presets. Maybe we should do a video just on presets for them.
And send an email to Tom right now. Sounds great.
One thing I'd like to point out also on the presets, what happened is when he wiped out his session, did a restructure, it did what you told it to do. So what Dan was bringing up is on the file session structure, you can hit a button to not get rid of your presets. So that's just something to look at right now.
All right. A couple of follow-ups from what we were just talking about with offline software. Somebody told me that crossover did not work for them. I've heard that a couple of times, that it can be a little bit confusing to set up. Paul from Group 1 New York also mentions that Wine emulation, which is the open source version of crossover, that stopped working recently. I have a feeling that had to do with Catalina on Mac, because that messed up a lot. And then let's see here. I think that's about it in there. Let's see here. Brandon Thompson asks, is the S series UI, so the user interface, the future of the SD series user interface? He goes, I like how clean the S series UI is, but it does have some limitations. Curious if that's the future of the SD series in some way. Dan, you're probably the best one to speak to this, and you probably couldn't tell us even if it was, but
not exactly. I mean, look, Quantum 338 has introduced some new technology, bigger screens. We now put some of those soft buttons on screen. They will have the ability to support, multi-touch environments on those bigger screens in Quantum 338 in the future, which takes us towards, what the S series does. Now, SD is never going to be the same as S series, but in terms of custom UIs, it's an interesting idea that we could maybe take what S series does and expand it into something that is a bit more akin to what people would expect on an SD series. But we will be developing the SD UI, obviously. The new look of Quantum 338 and the technology that the multi-touch screens bring to that range of consoles, or that console and potentially future consoles, of course, is gonna make a difference.
Awesome. Jim Roach actually joining in. He says, hi guys, when using the key input on a channel gate, SD7 Quantum, Does it also key any nodal processing gates on that channel as well? Dan, you're probably the best one to answer this. Do you understand the question?
I believe it's a common key. I'd have to go and actually try it on the console. In fact, you've got a quantum console in front of you.
I do. So entertain them for a second, Dan. Entertain them. Entertain them.
But I believe it's a common key, although I would want us to verify that before you take that as gospel. But that's my understanding. I think Ryan actually is probably just busily pressing buttons on a console as we speak.
Yes. So when you're looking at the nodal dynamics, so under the gate section, there is an on for the threshold. It is missing the key input selector that you would normally have on a channel, and then there is also a key listen. So there is not the choice for it. So I'm not sure if you don't get one altogether or if it follows the same source. So let's find out. All right, that is wide open there, and we are keyed from pink noise in this one, and we are open on our gates. So going back to nodal processing, it is not. So it is not opening up that channel like the gate of Dynamics 2 is. So it does not appear you have a gate or a key input available for your nodal processing. Good question, Jim.
Well done, Ryan, for testing that.
Yeah, look at that. That's why we have a console here. Okay, somebody has asked, Juan Jose Martinez asked, what does the DigiTube mean? Dan, since your face is on the screen, you want to answer that one too?
DigiTube is a tube, a valve emulator, a very basic valve emulator at the top of every channel. So it gives you the ability to control bias and drive. So drive is going to be the amount of effect, and bias is going to change the odd and even harmonics. So depending on what effect you're trying to achieve, dirty up a guitar sound or crunch something up it, the DigiTube at the top of the channel is going to provide that effect. Of course, on a quantum console, part of the mustard processing strip gives you some extra tube features, a couple of tube preamps with varying controls about harmonics and drive and some HF boost and a whole bunch of more functions beyond what the basic DigiTube is. But going back to your question, DigiTube, it is just a simple tube to dirty things up a little bit, I suppose, is simple explanation. So it's effective, it's simple, it's easy,
Yeah, I mean, basically, if I understand the concept right, and with my experience as limited as it is, to the same extent, we don't always enjoy, our ears don't always enjoy pristine audio. We always strive for that as far as maintaining the integrity of a signal, especially through DSP blocks processing, however you're doing it. But there's a lot of times, and for the majority of us, we do not actually like to hear something that is perfectly linear, that is completely flat. I've heard it described many times as it lacks musicality. It lacks warmth or humanity to it in some regard to it. It sounds very clinical. I do know some manufacturers do that, and I know at least our dynamic section, our EQs in the past on SD series have always been based around being as neutral as possible, so it doesn't color the sound too much one way or the other. But the DigiTube is specifically a tool designed to do just that, to give you warmth, to give you character, to give it some sort of personality, so it's not just a clean as it can be signal going through the system.
Yeah, I mean, why did we all like vinyl? Harmonic distortion, it was warm. It was,
yes.
I've also had a lot of luck, guys, using it in corporate situations where I've got to use a PA system. In the environment, and then after I'm all said and done, sending it through a group and hitting warm it up, and it sort of brings it back to life without leaving it all destroyed or sounds cut up.
That's
there's another
really good. Yeah. Okay, somebody, Jim Shelton, no relation to me, has asked, will there be a preset library for sharing? If I'm remembering, I think Jim is a S-Series user. So I know we just introduced presets in version 2.5. Dan, do you have any experience running this yet?
I don't. I would encourage you, through the forums and Facebooks to share, preset libraries. If they find something they like, and they find something that works for something, share it with your colleagues, your friends. Of course, the difficulty with shared preset libraries, and it's a bit of a warning, I think, from my point of view, people treat it as, the fix-all. I've loaded my kick drum preset, therefore my kick drum is finished. No, it's a starting point, and you should use that as a basis on which to work. Use your ears and your skills to tune it. Mixing by presets, that is, kick drum preset, snare preset, vocal preset, is not, in my mind, mixing. It's
tell us how you really feel, Dan. Tell us how you really feel.
Okay, I will.
Yeah. No, please don't.
That's the danger with preset libraries, and I appreciate it. At the S series end, and even sometimes at SD, it helps people achieve maybe 80% quite quickly, but must always then tweak.
Right? Why do you need to dial that in every time? Now, that's maybe a bad example because that takes, just a couple of seconds to dial in the basics of an SM50 on a vocal, but a pastor at a church or at a corporate environment, when you have somebody on a headset mic, you've used them in that room before that PA, you know where you're going to have to get to, and like you said, it'll get you 85% of the way there, and then you can do the fine tuning from there.
Absolutely.
I think part of it is on the presets, it's determining, when you do a preset, it sounds this kick drum in this room, this drummer who's playing on this DW kit, that same microphone with another drummer with another kit in another, maybe an arena versus a club is going to sound totally different. So I think we've kind of stayed away from having the presets available for customers. We did on the Quantum 3, we do have the presets in the Spice Rack. I think more just because of the complexity of setting it up.
Yes.
So I think the biggest thing, like Dan was saying, is you use the presets for speed. Once you figure out what you like and to store them, makes it faster for you, and what the environment was. Who was that drummer? What the room was? What was the actual mic? So just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, and as soon as you get that saved, the drummer is going to change a head, a beater, something. That's going to make it change altogether anyway. Go ahead, Dan.
I think it's one of those things that, when people have, moved from studio to live, they have presets maybe they've used in the studio and they want to use them within, plugin environments or whatever. And again, as Matt's saying, these things don't always translate from one environment into the other. You can't just take these things and assume they're going to work and sound the same in a different environment. With arenas, clubs, different mics, different, drums, whatever. It's a different night, different air temperature, different humidity. Everything makes it sound better.
It does.
I have a question.
Right. Yes, Matt.
This might be a good one for people to respond. When people do presets that are out with other manufacturers' stuff, do you think the engineers that turn in their presets are their actual presets, or do they modify them to keep a little bit to themselves? Let's see the text chat on this one.
But is Pooch on this one yet? Have we asked? Pooch, if you're on there, chime in. Nate Keeney asked, is there a way to check the status of individual optocord links? So I'm thinking he's asking for transmit receive strength there. I recently had an issue while serving up rack sharing to an outscore loop and ended up, I'm guessing that was probably Opticore with Apple autocorrect in there, to an Opticore loop, and ended up being a bad port on the SD rack MADI pod. Would be great if there was a way to check all the links on Opticore loop on the console. This one, I've actually heard some chatter that we are bringing that to a future update. Dan, is that something that we can tell people?
You pretty much just did there.
It's been on the request list for a long time. Obviously,
yes, I know that.
SD diagnostics do give you some indication of where within the loop you might have a problem. loop OK column within diagnostics, if you're missing one, it will direct you to where the break in the loop is. Obviously, as a redundant loop, it requires a full connection between every device, the A/B links. We currently don't have any dB meter, loss meter, that gives us further diagnostics. It's something that we've talked about for a long time.
Didn't the last update, I believe it was 1143 for the SD series, didn't that bring some, Chip, you may be able to chime in on this one too, if your rack is disconnected or there's an issue, don't we get a new pop-up that hopefully directs you to where it is?
It will notify you as to what is not responding, what specific device ID isn't responding on the loop. That'll narrow it down to the two cables connected in that one device.
Yeah, awesome. And if it's a touring system, something that's being pulled apart, quite often the simplest things are the things to check first. So are the cables seated correctly? Were the caps put on properly? So are the cables dirty? All the simple things are the things you should go and check first when diagnosing an optical loop problem. Don't just assume you've got some hardware, electronics failure. Quite often with these things, it's the simple stuff you need to go and just fix and plug it in properly, or clean the optic lens, or those sort of things. And you can probably fix 90% of stuff quite easily yourself.
Chip, as a person I know who has gone on site many installs that have issues with Opticore, obviously most of our first reaction is usually this is a hardware problem, right? Because nothing has changed, is how the most people see it, or things like that. What have you experienced going in to troubleshoot some of these installs along the same regards? I mean, obviously gear fails and transceivers, can fail just like anything else, but do you primarily see it being, dirty cables or faulty cables or things?
There's even in installed systems, there seems to always be at least like one console that comes and goes. It's used some days, not used every other days, and that's typically where I start. I take my measurements, start seeing, checking the fiber levels and cleaning them with an optic meter. We use an OWL optic meter, and the biggest thing is to go to your diagnostics Opticore tab and see right out of the gate if you're seeing an error right there. You'll have a loop functioning even if you don't have redundancy. So the Opticore tab will point you in a direction, that Opticore tab in diagnostics. So that's the first place to pop up, and I'll always ask for that screenshot first, just to narrow it down. As far as HMA cables, I'll tell people that they can always barrel the cables together and see if it comes back. Then you've narrowed down, faster. You can break the loop into pieces because the HMAs are male-female. They'll connect directly together and keep your loop together, so you can quickly, see which way things are going. Can't do that with ST. You'd have to get a couple of barrels, but it's possible. They're about $1 on Amazon, I think.
Yep. Nice. And if you're looking at an optic loop, and you suspect one of your racks isn't working, of course, the green display on it's going to sit there flashing away to say it's communicating properly. So if you can get eyes on one of your racks and you can see that, it's not flashing away, it's not communicating, you don't necessarily have to go and look at, diagnostics. You can physically see on the rack whether it's being spoken to. And I think, if you're doing a touring system and you're putting stuff together a lot and putting it apart, being methodical about how you put the stuff together, using the same cables in the same places, being repeatable and consistent is going to help you have a trouble-free experience. It's people that sort of don't have a plan and just connect stuff willy-nilly is where things can go awry.
All right, let's see here. Christoph is asking for T software on a Q338, no comment. RJ Givens is asking for T software on an SD12, so we'll just leave those for now because can't answer those. And then let's see here, Angela Williams is asking, will there be any discount on the SD updates during this time we are in? Angela, I don't think there are any current plans to do that. I know it's, I'm assuming you're talking about discounts on like broadcast software or theater software or something like that during this time. I haven't heard any plans to do that as well, because we're all pretty much in the same boat.
Just jump in on theatre and broadcast, Ryan, in that don't forget that if you're running offline and you're going to take this opportunity to go and learn some software, you can enable theatre and broadcast on our offline software for no charge. So if you want to go and do some training and play around with the software and don't have a console, get yourself the offline, you can switch it on and play with it. Starting next week, I'm going to be doing some Facebook Lives specifically for theatre. Probably a little series of them, to be honest. There's lots to cover, but that's going to be starting next week and running for the next few weeks. So, you know, if you are in the theatre market and want some training, get yourself the offline software, switch the T functions on. You'll see the changes, and then you'll be able to follow along next week when we do some more training.
Ryan, can you show them on the Quantum 3 how to turn that on?
What if I told you I wasn't listening to what you guys were saying because I was reading questions?
Go to Quantum 3, enable extensions. Now, the Quantum 3 does not have any other extensions, but this is where you'll actually go, is you would see if the desk had broadcast or theater, there would be a box that you could select. Now, on your offline editor, you can turn those on. You don't need to purchase it. It's free on the offline editor. In addition, the SD11, there's the SD11, then there's also the SD11i. So typically every SD11 in the United States is an I version. So that's something on your remote control editor you would want to enable right away.
All right, Lisa Tan asks, will DiGiCo be able to do anything similar to pop groups or a way to spell out your DCA grouped channels? We have a thing called set spill. So I'm not sure if you've seen this or not, Lisa. Set spill is under layout in set spill. So let me see if I can show you a little bit over here. If you can't read all the menus from here, but under layouts, there is an option for set spills. And the set spill is basically a window that lets you build custom sets of channels. So in here we can specify, I think on the Quantum 3 we have 12 set spills, but we can go in and tell it we want all these channels individually, or let me clean up my mess here. If I had everything already assigned to a control group, which is our term for VCAs, and we call them control groups, I can add them directly from here. So these would be the exact same members of a control group or a VCA or a DCA added right to this set spill. And then what you do is you assign that to a specific macro. So let me put it once again down where you can see it with the camera, but there over here now I have my option to trigger my set spill. So if I've gone through this and actually put something in there for you to see, then it's going to show me just those inputs, just those outputs, groups, things like that, and that will actually be triggered based on your options. So you can see on my left screen is currently switching based on what I have selected, this macro over here on the side, and that's just spilling out those channels. So not only is this somewhat similar to the pop groups, it actually takes it to a step further because you're not just limited to only showing what's in the VCA. A lot of times that's what we need out of it, that's what we get out of it, that's what we use it for. However, there are other situations, like if I wanted to see everything relating to drums in my session, I could have all my inputs for my drums, I could have my aux-fed subs, I could have my auxes that are feeding drum effects sends, I could have my effects returns on channels for those drums, I could have the drum VCA itself, I could also have subs on an aux, I could have maybe a drum group, maybe if I'm doing parallel compression, I could have 2 drum groups in there, the clean and the smash. So I can literally have on one layer of my surface everything at all relating to drums all on one page. And that to me is a very powerful way to be able to use set spills. And so those are triggered via macros. There's a menu option on the SD series that's under layouts, and it's called set spill, and you just add the channels directly from a control group or individually outputs everything together to be able to fire that. Now if you're on, that's if you're on an SD series or a Quantum series console. If you're on an S series console, they actually have an option to spill control groups. So this is actually in the preferences page of the S series console, so S21 or S31. You can choose which page it spills out onto, and then also if you want your solo button to just solo, or if you want it to just spill that control group, or if you want it to do both. So there are options for those in the S series directly as well. So SD series, as is usual, takes it up a notch and tries to give you a little bit more than you already have. All right, we're going to answer just a few more of these questions. Thank you guys for popping in. The original plan here was we were just going to see how this went. It seems like you guys have lots of questions. I'm enjoying the format. I hope everybody else is as well. I think we're going to start doing these somewhat regularly. So if you don't get your questions answered today, don't worry. Join us on the next one. We'll just maybe make these a Friday staple, an hour, maybe an hour and a half max, and just answer your questions and get through it. And if we don't get to you this week, definitely join in next week and we'll do that as well.
And we'll try to actually respond to these questions online so everybody can see what those answers are for things we didn't get to.
Yeah, I believe we're keeping the feed live for a little while after as well, just to be able to answer some of those questions. All right. RJ Gibbons is asking for the ability to type in specific values going to be added to the console or remote software. Specifically helpful with the remote software, for example, setting send values, head amps, etc. So versus just in the offline software, grabbing your mouse, dragging it up and down. Dan, I assume we can pass that on to the R&D guys, right?
It's already on the suggestions list. Actually, quite recently for live and for theatre, we've been through that list and we're trying to rationalise, what gets done and what isn't done. But that is already on the list of things that to look at. So hopefully, good news for you soon, and we'll be able to deliver it. Yes.
All right, Kyle. This next question is for you. You ready?
Yeah.
Make sure everybody can hear you there too. Yeah. So Marcal says, what app is used for this video conference?
I just replied back.
It's Ecamm Live, and we're all trying to figure out how to be video guys now, and I can't wait to be an audio guy again. A lot of time on YouTube trying to figure out all this latency stuff and Skype and how everything interacts. So, yeah, It's a lot of fun.
All right, Martin Jaggert is asking, is there a way to change bank layout with a snapshot on SD series? Dan, you want to take that one?
No, we can't change layout, but what you can do is you could build yourself extra custom banks with the channels that you want to see in any given bank, and then use snapshots to bring that bank to the surface. Actually, from a workflow point of view, repopulating banks with different channels with snapshot recall, when you can fire through snapshots really quickly, isn't particularly effective. So either build yourself extra custom fader banks and bring those to the surface with snapshots, or use the spill set, which Ryan just demonstrated. Instead of doing it with snapshots, you have a macro button there in front of you, and you can just hit the button and see the channels you need to see. So there's a couple of different options, but not repopulating the contents of a bank with snapshots.
Yes. So basically, by default, whenever you fire off a snapshot, the banks that were set up on the desk is how it's going to be. If you go into your per act per scene, there is an option you can turn on the bank button. If you make that a green check on every single scene, then what it's going to do is, if I'm in scene number 5 and I have my strings over my right bay and I save that, when I fire that snapshot off, it's going to go from whatever bank I'm on to those strings banks. In some ways, it can be a little dangerous because you might be working on something and you got your hand on, you fire off a snapshot, and now you're no longer on, say, my QLab, you're now over on your strings. Going in with the part that Ryan was just showing is actually probably a little bit more efficient way to do that.
Yeah, and I believe what you have to do with that is you have to create a MIDI loop to have the snapshot fire the macro, because the snapshot won't fire the set spill, from what I understand. Dan, do you know that? But I know people that have used it, and they just have to do MIDI out back to MIDI in, so the snapshot fires the macro.
Macros with snapshots is a macro can fire a snapshot, and a snapshot could fire a macro. You'd end up in this weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, it requires a little bit of out of the box thinking, but totally doable if that's really what you want to do. And the other thing, in terms of layout that we see a lot of people do is, because you can put any fader anywhere on the surface as many times as you like. Your primary fader on the right hand side, fader 1, could be the same channel on every bank. So it doesn't matter where you are, within your surface, within your layout, you've always got your hand on the money fader. So, you know, lots of ways of dividing the surface up and dealing with the changes that you need to make.
All right, so let's power through a few more real quick. You guys, if you are on Facebook, the panelists here, let's start combing through those last questions that we want to cover for today's session. Ben Shipman asks, when will the Clang integration be released in SD12 with DMI card? My understanding is that will be in the next software release. You'll be able to legally put the DMI card in the SD12. I have one in this Quantum here, but it's running beta software for the next. So it is doing that, but next software release. I see any plan for a Milan or AVB cards for SD racks. I know that. Anybody else? Are we catching up?
No.
Okay,
Yeah, we're
good.
catching up. I would say on the AVB card, that would probably be more of a DMI card slot versus a card that goes into an SD rack.
I would imagine so as well. Yep, just based on what they're doing now.
Cost-wise.
But yeah, I don't think we have any sort of timeline on releasing that or news about that. Let's see here, asking if there's any possibility to color code on the function of that channel. So if it's an input channel, it's gray. If it's a group, it's red. If it's a matrix, it's green. If it's an aux, it's purple. And those are fixed based on their channel type. And if we let you change the color based on what you wanted it to be, it would get very confusing as we allow you to put inputs, outputs, and everything all within the same bank. That is a request that we've been having for a number of years, probably long before I actually started with DiGiCo as well. Brandon Thompson is asking, is it possible to troubleshoot Opticon cables, so this would be Neutrik Opticon connections, using a flashlight? He says, can you see the light if the cable is at least passing something? I've had a cable not pass light that was run over by a forklift. It was crushed. Chip.
I would recommend picking up a tester, but you can always and use it as a tester by opening up that diagnostics optical tab I mentioned and looping the desk to itself. You should see the engine pop up and say, okay, if you have a good working cable. You can then mess with the cable and make sure that it's stable, and then you can go through that as with all your cables. So you can basically use that tab and the console as a tester.
All right, I see another one. It's asking if, see here, I've been hoping to see the copy audio be part of the scope. I'm guessing that's snapshot scope for snapshots, yep. Any luck on that anytime soon? Dan, you would know better than I. I know that's been on the feature request list. I don't know where it is on that feature request list, but I don't have any notice.
Well, it is on the list. You know, the difficulty from a manufacturer's point of view is this list and trying to work out, you know, what's more important for, you know, for development terms. And so it's a game we play. It's on the list. I'm sure at some point it will get done. But you know, the more people, generally speaking, the more people who make a sound argument for a specific feature, the more likely it is to climb the list. I'm not suggesting that you will suddenly request that, because that's probably now not going to make a difference. But you know, the way we develop our software, the way we develop our tools and make the choices is really based on a lot of user feedback. And for the last, well, I've been with DiGiCo since 12 years now, and that's always the way. In that time, it's been done. So you know, keep plugging away, keep making requests. They do go on the list, and eventually most things, you know, do get into the.
Should we just give them Austin's email address or his personal cell phone number, so they can just text him with those feature
with
requests?
Their credit card and get it done. Yeah.
There you go.
I think the one thing to mention is that DiGiCo is fantastic on actually listening to the end user. That's how we've been able to get to the platforms and how successful the company's been, is because of listening to engineers over the years and actually implementing what the customers are asking for. So really the best way is to send a real email with as much information as you can. Send it to any one of us and include support. We always push it over to the UK, and they do add it on the list. Whether it gets implemented or not, somebody's getting their eyes on those ideas. So keep sending those ideas in. an email is the best form of it versus just a phone conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got a record that it was your idea too.
Chris Heckman asks, will the SD9 ever have the capability to use both insert points at the same time? I believe that's a hardware limitation, but Dan, you might know.
I think at the moment that's a no.
Okay.
You know, never say never, but I'm not the person writing the engine code, so I'm not going to definitively say one way or the other at this point.
You could cheat and just use 2 channels if you really needed to have 2 separate insert points. Mm-hmm. Direct out back into another channel strip.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. I think this is probably a good spot to wrap it for today. We did have a couple of questions where people were asking when the next one will be. I think the plan is to make these, at least try to make them a weekly occurrence. Hopefully we will not, Friday, meaning
Friday,
so
1 o'clock.
Next Friday, 1 o'clock Central Time in the U.S. Kyle, when is that? What is it, British summertime? Daniel, no, is that 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock in the
7
evening,
p.m.
8
Yes.
o'clock in Europe.
1900 hours as it was. Yep.
2 p.m. on the East.
Okay. So yeah, we'll try to do this weekly. My hope and prayer is that we don't have too many of these before we are back and way too busy to possibly imagine sitting around on Facebook, talking to each other, answering questions, waiting for those panicked phone calls hitting us on Friday afternoons as people are trying to get up and going for their shows for the weekends. Really and truly, everybody watching, our thoughts and prayers are with all of you. Our industry has been hit very hard by this shutdown. We feel it as well. So don't for a second think that we're not. We are just hoping to try to keep the communication lines open, answer those questions that you have going around. Once again, our thoughts and prayers are with all of you. Hopefully your family stays safe, you guys stay safe, and we look forward to doing a lot more of these. So if you enjoyed it, tune in next week, same time, same place, and keep the questions coming. Thank you for everybody for everything you've done for this. I believe the plan is to keep the feed live for a little while to be able to answer questions via the comments section. Just kind of wrap those up. But once again, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Kyle. Everybody, appreciate the inputs, and we'll see you soon.
Take care, guys.
Goodbye.
Yeah.